The final solution, and the slaughter of millions of Jews during World War II, is the defining tragedy of the 20th century. But there are those who claim that the Holocaust is a myth, that the millions who died are mere phantoms, that the few who survived are liars. Today, more than 50 years after those terrible events, the very reality of the Holocaust is being challenged.
A historian seeking the truth or a willful liar and Holocaust denier? That's the judgment the court will have to make on David Irving, arriving today for the libel case in which he's representing himself.
January the 11th this year, an extraordinary trial opened at the High Court in London. The plaintiff was David Irving, hailed by his supporters as the preeminent historian of the Third Reich, reviled by his critics as an apologist for the Nazis' greatest crime. Irving was fighting a one-man libel action against American academic Deborah Lipstadt and her publisher Penguin Books over her 1993 book, Denying the Holocaust. She has branded him one of the most dangerous of the men who call themselves revisionists. Familiar with historical evidence, she wrote, he bends it until it conforms with his ideological leanings and political agenda. Irving claimed that Lipstadt had conspired to ruin his reputation and his livelihood. This program will reconstruct, with actors, key exchanges from the trial. We will also explore the evidence presented by David Irving and by his opponents to trace the tragic record of the Holocaust. David Irving will represent himself in the trial, mounting his case alone and without legal support. Against him, the defense, headed by Richard Rampton, QC, has marshaled a team of historians and experts who have worked for more than a year to assemble a mass of documents and evidence. Defendant Deborah Lipstadt will exercise her right not to speak during the trial. Over the course of 3 months, the trial will raise fundamental issues about the freedoms and responsibilities of history in the recording and interpretation of an unimaginable human tragedy.
Court, rise.
The case will be heard by Mr. Justice Gray. There will be no jury. What began as a libel case will become a trial of the Holocaust itself.
I have never held myself out to be a Holocaust expert, nor have I written books about what is now called the Holocaust. If I am an expert in anything at all, I may be so immodest to submit that it is in the role that Adolf Hitler played in propagating World War II, and in the decisions he made, and the knowledge on which he based those decisions. Since then, I've been obliged, willy-nilly, to become something of a Holocaust expert, through no desire of my own. To my utmost distaste, it has become evident that it is no longer possible to write pure history, untrammeled and uninfluenced by politics, once one enters into this unpleasant field. To justify her allegations of manipulation and distortion, it will not suffice for Professor Lipstadt to show, if she can, that I misinterpreted what happened, but that I knew what happened, and that I perversely and deliberately, for whatever purpose, portrayed it differently from how I knew it to have happened. The word denier is particularly evil because no one who is in full command of his mental faculties and with the slightest knowledge of what happened in World War II can deny that the tragedy actually happened. However much we dissident historians may wish to quibble over the scale, the means, the dates, and other minutiae, it is like being called a wife-beater, a paedophile. It is a verbal yellow star.
Irving insists that he is not a denier of the Holocaust, but simply an historian who has asked awkward questions. He challenges three key aspects of the Holocaust. Irving has argued that there was no systematic plan to exterminate the Jews, that there is no proof that Hitler ordered a policy of extermination, and that no Jews were killed in gas chambers at Auschwitz. To win the case, the defense must prove that Irving has knowingly distorted the historical record.
My lord, Mr. Irving calls himself an historian. The truth is, however, he is not a historian at all, but a falsifier of history. To put it bluntly, he is a liar. Mr. Irving has used many different means to falsify history. Invention, misquotation, suppression, distortion, manipulation, not least mistranslation. But all these techniques have the same ultimate effect: falsification of the truth. Mr. Irving is nowadays a Holocaust denier. By this I mean that he denies that the Nazis planned and carried out the systematic murder of millions of Jews, in particular, though by no means exclusively, by the use of homicidal gas chambers. In September 1991, Mr. Irving spoke to an audience in Calgary, Alberta. He complained about pressure from Jewish people and Jewish bodies designed to prevent him from speaking. He said something which, though facetiously worded, conveys a message about his true views and attitudes which can only be taken very seriously. It was this: I don't see any reason to be tasteful about Auschwitz. It's baloney. It's a legend. Once we admit the fact that it was a brutal slave labor camp and large numbers of people did die, as large numbers of people died elsewhere in the war, why believe the rest of the baloney?
David Irving has become a hero of far-right groups around the world. As this footage played in the court shows, he has spoken to neo-Nazi rallies, where he has challenged the historical record of the Third Reich and the final solution. In his 30-year journey from controversial historian to alleged Holocaust denier, Irving has cast himself at the center of a bitter drama marked by fines, arrests, and deportations. From the 1960s, David Irving established his reputation as a formidable researcher into the documentation of the Third Reich in a series of books about World War II and the Nazi leadership. Armed with an outstanding command of the German language, developed during his work in a German steelworks, he repeatedly unearthed important new evidence, which he regularly shared with other scholars.
He has been praised by reputable historians for, at that time, not accepting, as some historians did, that everything was known already and simply regurgitating what had been said already.
In 1977, Irving published Hitler's War, which established his reputation with a wide popular audience. In the book, he accepted the historic reality of the Holocaust, but he argued that there was no documentary proof that Adolf Hitler had ordered the final solution.
Irving shook us up. I had always assumed, I think almost everyone had assumed, that Hitler had signed a direct order beginning the Holocaust, and that it was a simple, straightforward crime, and we were certainly brought up to believe that. What Irving did was say, well, hold on, there is no documentary evidence. And that was a useful role that he performed. He may have been politically motivated, I'm sure he was, but nevertheless he focused attention on a gap in the historical record that people have been trying to explain and fill actually ever since.
Irving's reputation was further enhanced when he successfully challenged the authenticity of the so-called Hitler diaries in 1983.
So what do you say about the diaries? The ink has to be tested by a qualified laboratory like Hainer and Cox in the city of London.
But by the time of publication of the second edition of Hitler's War in 1991, all trace of the Holocaust had disappeared. Auschwitz was no longer a monstrous killing machine, but merely a slave labor camp.
Why are you being criticized then?
Because pressure groups want to deny me freedom of speech.
Irving was deported from Canada, refused entry to Australia, and threatened with arrest in Germany. But as a skilled publicist for his views, he has become the most notorious historian of the Third Reich and the most effective spokesman for the revision of the Nazi record.
According to the evidence that I have seen, there was no gas chambers anywhere yet.
David Irving was the kind of Holocaust denier who could get into people's living rooms, through books, through articles, through television appearances. I think he was probably the only one who could have made a real dent on public opinion.
Today, a determined campaign in Europe and America echoes Irving's belief that the historical record of the final solution is a lie, orchestrated by the international Jewish lobby. The communications between Holocaust deniers have become more sophisticated, but their methods are well established. Exploiting public ignorance and fading memories of the details surrounding the extermination of Europe's Jews, the deniers distort documents and misquote records, challenging legitimate historians to validate the established record of the final solution.
But they kind of say, you got to prove everything. Prove that you're alive. Prove where you were born. Prove that you breathe. Prove, prove, prove.
The defense insists that Irving's work as a scholar has been warped by his politics. Central to their case is their attempt to portray him as a racist. In preparation for the trial, the defense has had access to all of Irving's private diaries, compiled over a 40-year period. They are able to make use of some of this material in their cross-examination.
This is Irving in his diary speaking to Irving. This is not Irving punting some thesis about Jewish culpability to a television audience. Quiet evening at home, etc., etc. Jessica, who is Jessica?
My little infant child.
Yes?
Well, she was 9 months old at this time.
9 months old in September 1994. Jessica is turning into a fine little lady. She sits very upright on an ordinary chair. Her strong back muscles are a product of our regular walks in my arms to the bank, etc., etc. On those walks, we sing the Binkety Bankety Bong song. There are 2 other poems in which she stars. My name is Baby Jessica, I have got a pretty dressica, but now it is in a messica. And, more scurrilously, when half-breed children are wheeled past, and then you go into italics. I am a baby Aryan, not Jewish or sectarian. I have no plans to marry an ape or a Rastafarian.
Yes?
Racist, Mr. Irving. Anti-Semitic, Mr. Irving, yes?
I do not think so.
teaching your little child this kind of poison.
Do you think a 9-month-old can understand words spoken in English or any other language?
I shall tell you something, Mr. Irving. When I was 6 months old, I said, "Pussy sits in the apple tree until she thinks it's time for tea."
You were very precocious.
I was, my lord. But then I burnt out at 2.
Perhaps I should set this in context. The scurrilous magazine, Searchlight, had just published a photograph of myself and Jessica and her mother, who's very blonde and extremely beautiful, and it had sneered at us as being the perfect Aryan family.
But they did not write this. You did.
Yes, but this is my little private response to this rather nasty sneer.
Later, Irving returns to this scrutiny by the defense of his private attitudes and behavior.
You have had between 20 and 30 million words of my private diaries, also complete transcripts of my telephone conversations, where they were recorded on tape and transcribed. You've also had transcripts of innumerable speeches and lectures that I delivered. Out of all this enormous documentation, you and the entire defense team have picked 1 or 2 sentences, which you have then displayed for the delectation of the entire world, have you not? I say that this is unrepresentative. 19 words out of 30 million. Do you know what percentage of me is therefore racist? 0.00016% of me is racist, which means that 99.9984 of me is not.
And is it the historian's job to be liked?
To emphasize Irving's right-wing connections, the defense show a video of a speech he gave to the National Alliance, an American right-wing political group. He's recounting his response to a Jewish questioner at one of his meetings.
You are disliked, you people. You have been disliked for 3,000 years. You have been disliked so much that you have been hounded from country to country, from pogrom to purge, from purge back to pogrom, and yet you never ask yourselves why you're disliked. That's the difference between you and me. It never occurs to you to look in the mirror and say, why am I disliked? What is it that the rest of humanity doesn't like about the Jewish people to such an extent that they repeatedly put us through the grinder? And he went berserk. He said, are you trying to say that we are responsible for Auschwitz, ourselves? I said, well, the short answer is yes. The short answer, I have to say, is yes.
Irving calls expert witness Professor Kevin MacDonald, who has written widely about the sociological roots of anti-Semitism, to explain why Jewish organizations regard him as dangerous.
Professor MacDonald, in what way am I dangerous, do you suspect? Am I the kind of person they think may place a bomb in their letterbox?
No. Obviously, they view you as a danger because of your writings. I believe they think they are a danger to their belief that their version of events be accepted as the truth, and that dissent from certain of these tenets should be viewed as beyond the pale of rational discussion.
Do you consider me to be an anti-Semite, from your knowledge of me?
I do not consider you to be an anti-Semite.
Irving has never sought to deny that anti-Semitism was at the heart of Hitler's ideology. In standing guard against the Jew, Hitler wrote, I am defending the handiwork of the Lord. Irving has also never hidden his admiration for Hitler.
He seems to want to exculpate Hitler. That seems to be a key element of his agenda. He has himself said, I believe, that Hitler had said to his doctor, I think it was, that at some point a historian would come along, and it would be an English historian who would write a true account of these events, and he seems to think that he is, that historian.
When he invited him to speak at Cambridge in 1977, novelist Robert Harris had a vivid experience of Irving's enthusiasm for the Führer.
I went off to meet Irving from the Cambridge railway station with this sort of declaration of liberal principle in my hand, and Irving came along the platform towards me, unmistakable figure. I'll never forget him. The light sort of caught him, his hair hanging down here, slight gap in his upper lip, which looked rather shadowed. And I said, "Mr. Irving," and he said, "Mr. Harris," and he put out his hand. I shook it, and he said, "Congratulations, you've just shaken the hand that shook the hand that shook the hand of the Führer."
One of Irving's central challenges to the generally accepted view of the Holocaust is that there is no documentary evidence that Hitler planned or ordered it. For years, Irving has been offering $1,000 to anyone who can produce a document. Irving claims that the absence of an early order from Hitler demolishes the vision of the Holocaust being planned and organized at the highest levels of the Reich. But most historians insist that in fact Hitler's plans for the final solution evolved over time and were not the result of a single decision.
I would suggest now, after 50 years of research, that Hitler's decision was made in stages, that his thinking evolved, and that his pronouncements became ever more drastic and ever more specific with this evolution.
There was no single decision when he said, we will now exterminate all the Jews of Europe in extermination camps. I think this is a process which developed, but he was there always giving approval to the major steps that were being taken.
The trial will follow in detail the developing stages of the final solution. An early portent of the nightmare awaiting the Jews was Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, was the first great Nazi pogrom of Germany's Jewish community. According to the defense, in his 1996 biography of Goebbels, Irving attempted to exonerate Hitler of this atrocity by insisting that the Führer was unaware of it, and that when he was made aware later, he attempted to stop it. Defense witness Professor Richard Evans of Cambridge University has reviewed Irving's use of documents. It is the interpretation of crucial telegrams and documents and the defense's allegation that Irving has deliberately mistranslated and misinterpreted them which lies at the heart of the case. Irving confronts Evans with a telegram from the office of Deputy Reichsführer Hess, issued in the early hours of the 10th of November, which he claims shows that Hitler wanted an end to the pogrom.
Are you familiar with the message which went out from the office of Rudolf Hess?
This is a telegram at 2:56 a.m. on the 10th of November 1938 from Rudolf Hess to all the local Nazi Party leaders. May I translate it, please, Mr. Irving? Arson or the laying of fire in Jewish shops or the like may not or must not take place under any circumstances and in no case, and so on. That is the essence of it.
Pretty emphatic, is it not?
Yes. What it is saying is that nobody is to set light to Jewish shops
or businesses
or similar kinds of premises. It is not saying that nobody should arrest the Jews. It is not saying that nobody should smash the shops up. It is not saying that nobody should smash up the apartments and houses of Jews.
Professor, I have not asked you what it does not say.
It does not say that nobody should commit arson against...
Professor, I have not asked you what it does not say.
Well, what it does not say, Mr. Irving, is extremely important. This is a very limited telegram which is saying that Jewish shops and similar kinds of premises are not to be set alight. The reason for that is very simple. It's the same kind
Where
of
does
telegram.
it say similar kinds of businesses?
May I finish my answer, please, Mr. Irving? It's the same kind of telegram that went out from Heydrich at 1:20 or from Müller at 11:55. That is to say, it is saying that laying fire to Jewish shops and similar premises, whatever they might be, is not to be allowed because, of course, it endangers the surrounding premises, which are owned by Germans.
Where does it say that?
Would you please not interrupt?
And, of course, some of these shops may well have been owned by Germans. That is all it is saying. It is very limited. It is not saying bring the whole thing to an end. That is a completely illegitimate interpretation of this document. Hitler is saying here, go ahead with burning down synagogues, go ahead with wrecking Jewish shops and smashing up the interiors, go ahead with arresting 20,000 people, go ahead with smashing up Jewish apartments, destroying the furniture, chucking it out of the window, throwing some of the inhabitants out of the window, go ahead with all of that, but don't commit arson on Jewish shops or similar premises.
You read all of that out of these 3 lines, do you?
Yes. I think what is omitted from here is more significant in a way than what is in here, and it's a tissue of lies on your part, Mr. Irving, based on the shameless manipulation of documents like this, whose meaning is absolutely obvious to anybody with even the most elementary knowledge of German.
I think we have seen this morning, and from a number of your remarks, that you dislike what I write. You dislike what I stand for. You dislike what you perceive my views to be. Is this correct?
I do not have any personal feelings at all. I was simply asked to write a report, which I have done, about your writings and speeches.
Wenn es dem internationalen Finanzjudentum in und außerhalb Europas gelingen sollte, die Völker noch einmal in einen Weltkrieg zu stürzen, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht der Sieg des Judentums sein, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
With the German invasion of Poland and the beginning of the Second World War, the ominous threat delivered by Hitler against the Jews was to become real. Up until the end of 1939, 7,000 Jews had been killed in 6 years of Nazi rule. With the rapid Nazi advances, and with millions of Jews in Eastern Europe now falling under Nazi control, the leadership debated how to resolve what they called the Jewish question.
Suddenly they found themselves with several million more Jews, and what's more, Jews who were felt to be dangerous in the sense that they were associated with Bolshevism, and they were Orthodox Jews, many of them, and that created a kind of otherness, which to some extent fueled and made it easier, fueled the kind of hostility and the feeling, that the Jews were somehow not like us, they're subhuman, if you like.
Soon, the Nazis had herded millions of Polish Jews into ghettos, cordoned off in desperately overcrowded areas of Warsaw and other big cities. But they were also considering another, more radical solution to the Jewish question.
The 3.5 million natives on the island are divided into 6 different tribes, and here we meet the Betzaleos.
Hitler had regularly discussed the possibility of shipping Europe's Jews to the island of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. For Irving, the existence of the plan demonstrates that deportation, rather than extermination, was the Nazis' preferred option. When defense witness Professor Christopher Browning takes the stand, Irving examines the Madagascar plan.
How realistic was the Madagascar plan?
Do I think they took it seriously? Yes, I do think they took it seriously. It is fantastic, but of course, Auschwitz is fantastic too.
In what way was Madagascar a fantastic plan?
Fantastic in the sense of bizarre. The notion that you could take 4 million Jews and put them on ships and send them to Madagascar, and that anything other than the vast bulk of them would die under the conditions of being dumped into the jungle of Madagascar. Even that a plan that clearly in its implications involved vast decimation, they still talked in these words of resettlement.
But is this not exactly what happened with the State of Israel? Millions of these people were taken and dumped in Israel, so to speak. Although they did it voluntarily, it was an uprooting and a geographical resettlement.
The number of people coming into Israel, of course, came in gradually. And there was a structure and an organization to arrange for and assist their reception.
You think it was a totally impracticable proposition, the idea of sending 6 million Jews, or whatever it was, to an island the size of Madagascar?
I think they would have attempted it, and I think the results would have been disastrous.
Why would they have been disastrous?
Because I think a large percentage of the people sent there would have perished.
Oh, I think the Jews are a very sturdy people. They've shown that by their forthrightness in Palestine, have they not?
I think the conditions under which they arrived there, an island which the documents said clearly was to be an SS state, would not have been anything remotely similar to the conditions of an attempted and organized reception of refugees in Palestine after 1945.
If Hitler's intention was to exterminate all the Jews systematically, why then would he have had a pipe dream of sending the Jews to a country like Madagascar, where they would have survived?
I do not believe at that point that he intended to destroy the Jews systematically. He wanted a problem to disappear.
Those who were running the ghettos in Poland believed that this was a possible solution to the overcrowding and disease in the ghettos. It's only once it is impossible to send Jews to Madagascar or across the Urals that the Nazis come to the rather more radical, lethal solution of mass murder.
Mass murder became an option with the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941. The German Army High Command had been instructed to prepare for a brutal conflict of ideology and racial opposition. Hitler insisted that the struggle would have to be conducted with unprecedented, unmerciful, and unrelenting harshness. Four motorized task forces known as the Einsatzgruppen were set up to follow the German Blitzkrieg. Their highest priority was the massacre of Soviet commissars and Jews. The Holocaust had begun.